words of my lips and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable to you, our strength and our salvation. Amen. Please be seated. You gotta love Peter. He's a bit wishy-washy. He's a man taken to dramatic statements that all too soon become something different. So on this last Sunday of the Epiphany season, in year A, B, and C, we always get a reading, either Matthew, Mark, or Luke's, depending upon what year it is, of that mountaintop experience, that aha revelation of Jesus shining with the light of divinity. There's a reason for that. It says right in our opening collect that the apostles were given that experience, that aha. Remember, Epiphany is about aha moments, and this is the biggest aha. You know, we start out with water into wine, you know, a miracle here, a miracle there, baptism, voice from the heaven, all that Epiphany stuff. But now we get Jesus, the son of Joseph, on a mountaintop, shining with divine light. And Peter, Lord, it's good for us to be here. Let me build some booths. Let's stay. Let's stick around for a while, right? That's Peter. I'll build some booths. We're going to stay here. Camp out. Now note, this is Peter, who not all that long afterwards falls asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Peter, who not so long afterwards says, oh, I don't know, right? Peter's a lot like us. That God experience that they have on the top of the mountain is meant to prepare the apostles for what is to follow. They're on their way to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets. And so that experience of Jesus in his divinity is meant to strengthen them, to gird them, to root them in the reality of who Jesus is. Just as it's meant to root us, because this Wednesday we start our journey to Holy Week, Lent, the Lenten journey to Holy Week, and then of course resurrection at the other end. But first we have to get through Holy Week. So it's meant to remind us before we start that journey, as it was meant to remind the apostles before they started that journey to Jerusalem. I like Peter because he's the one who says, Lord, let me walk to you across the water, and then notices the soles of his feet are getting a little wetter and ends up sinking. Morton Kelsey says, he's Episcopal priest, Jungian psychologist, now deceased, but he used to say that there's 365 times in the Bible where it says, fear not. Because we keep forgetting. So God keeps reminding us, fear not, I am with you. Fear not, you'll get there. Fear not, you'll be there when you're supposed to be there and not a minute before. The shining light of countenance on Jesus' face to prepare the disciples for all that was to follow. And to prepare us as well. Sometimes in our difficult times in our own journeys, we can only know that God is with us when we look back. And we say, gee, how did I get through that? So it's good to remember those times, and the times when God seems very, very far away, and it seems pretty foggy, and we say, as Jesus did on the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me? It's good to know that even Jesus said that. It's good for the people of St. Mary's to know that. when they had a failed search and you're starting the process all over again, right? That you had a wonderful rector, and you have a history of wonderful rectors, and you will have a wonderful rector again. It's good to remember that when you're in the process of the search. Having worked in healthcare for 40 years, I've been with many people who've had near-death experiences. And I would say about a third of my hospice patients have some kind of experience in the last couple of weeks of seeing somebody on the other side, dreaming of someone on the other side, talking to someone who no one else in the room sees. We talk about the communion of saints, so why should we be surprised? Sometimes the nurses say they're hallucinating. I never think it's hallucination. Research has shown, and my own experience has shown, that very often near-death experiences are very close to experiences of God. They're almost always experienced, and I've had my own God experience back in the 80s. They're very close to that experience on the top of the mountain. Oh, it's good to be here. Can I stick around for a while? Let me just stay here. Back in the 70s, when I was a cardiac nurse, I was the one who would take the paddles and paddle people who were having their own near-death experiences with the heart stopping or in a death arrhythmia. And I remember one particular man, I remember where his bed was in the room. He was annoyed with me because he said, you know, it was very peaceful there. I was seeing the light, it was good, I wanted to stay, and you kept saying, Joe, breathe, Joe, breathe. And I didn't want to breathe. And then I just got the sense, he couldn't tell me whether he heard a voice or how he got the sense, but he knew it wasn't time. And so he started to breathe, and he came back. That's that God experience. That's made to strengthen us for the times when it gets pretty foggy sometimes, doesn't it? So this is Transfiguration, where the apostles see Jesus shining with the light of God's countenance. And in cultures all over the world, when you have a God experience, we say, fear of the Lord. That's that awe. It's not fear and trembling. It's fear as in awe. When Zechariah saw God and heard his wife was going to have a baby, John the Baptist, he was struck dumb. He couldn't speak for the 40 weeks of pregnancy, right? That experience of God with awe and trembling, that leaves you back in the 80s when I did my residency year in chaplaincy. Part of how I survived that year, I was at Sloan Kettering, but how I survived that year of residency was every Monday night I went for a full body massage. It was marvelous. And my massage therapist was a Jesuit priest who in his mid-50s decided the last thing the world needed was another PhD Jesuit, so he went to the Swedish Institute and got his certification. All of his clients were people in ministry. But I learned that when I got back on the New York subway to go back home, if you work in healthcare, you know that you can't lie to kids or you can't lie to crazies, right? Because they see right through it. You have to be honest because they're open and they pick it up. Well, I learned to get on the subway with a newspaper or book because apparently my shield was down after that massage and they would all come and want to tell me their stories. So here you have Moses, and he veils his face because he's had a God experience. There's something else on that mountaintop I wanted to point out, which is who's with them? Moses. Who's up there on the mountaintop, folks? Elijah. And who else?
Moses.
Moses, Elijah and Moses. Do you know why? Elijah considered one of the greatest of the prophets, who, if you do a Passover Seder, they still set the place for Elijah, because he may be coming, right? There's an empty place, it's for Elijah. Because Elijah was never buried. He rose up. Elisha watched him go, right? So it's Elijah, one of the greatest of the prophets, and it's Moses, who came down from the mountain with the law. Jesus, shining with the light of God's countenance, the fulfillment of the law, Moses, and the prophets, Elijah. So they're there with Jesus on the mountaintop. At the Rite One service, you say, "Hear what our Lord Jesus Christ saith. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law, Moses, and the prophets, Elijah." And there's Jesus on the mountaintop. And they don't have to shield their face, because Jesus is God made man and dwelling among us and in each one of you. And so as we start this Wednesday, your journey of Lent, remember, you may be the only face of God that someone else sees. God becomes man and dwells among us in each one of us. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and the prophets.